actually HR Technologies.
I
Did you go?
I really, really wanted to go and I couldn't. And I see quite a few of our friends were speaking. Did you attend?
Yeah.
Are you in the UK?
No, I'm in Canada.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise I would have gone to that event as well. But yeah, apparently, it's good to see these big events happening. It seems like
Yeah,
very, very regular. We get something banging out, which is fantastic.
yeah, indeed.
Yeah. Anyway, listen. Welcome everybody to Brain Food Live on Air, bringing it to you every week, no fail, every Friday, no fail, and it's episode 254. And today we are very excited to have this conversation. And the reason why I think we wanted to try and have a conversation that was quite technical, quite future facing, and really quite, letting our imaginations run wild a little bit. And the reason why is obviously artificial intelligence is having a huge impact on working life and technology production and all the rest of it. But what is the second and third order effect on all of this, particularly when it comes to job board advertising? And this all emerged from a conversation online with one of our guests who posted a really interesting commentary on perhaps the future of job boards may actually be them as a data licenser, given the fact that so many LLMs are so desperate for data. If you hold proprietary data, you can either build your own LLM or license it out. And a good example of that, I think, was it Stack Overflow or Reddit? One of the two big social networks sold something to Google or something and said, look, we've got all this data. You can train your LLM on it. And then suddenly, can job boards do the same? So today is a speculation as to what is the future of job board advertising in the era of generative AI. Should be really, really interesting, folks. So I'll be looking forward to your commentary on all of that as well. All right, before we kick off, let's have a look at our sort of audio and visual. So if you can hear me okay, by the way, on Crowdcast, do let me know. This is a new setup. I've kind of just jumped into a friend of mine's office. So I'm not sure everything's all set up as the way it should be. But let me know if you can hear me in Crowdcast. We should be live streaming this across multiple LinkedIn's. And we should be out on Facebook as well. Let me just check whether I'm out there as well. Facebook, by the way, this is the last ever Brain Food Live that's going to go out onto Facebook because I believe that they're going to cut us off from there on the 22nd of April. So if you're watching this on the Facebook group, this is it, man. This is it. No
I'll
more.
be, I'll be interested to see if that is what happens. I was talking to Si at Crowdcast, and his understanding of their announcement is slightly different from what you're saying. He thinks it'll still work. So we'll find out.
Okay, well, I'm getting this from Restream, which is the
Yeah.
third-party tool I use, and they're saying, yeah, we can't
Oh,
be
yeah.
we can't restream it out. So I think there's another technique to do it, but maybe you can't do it via Restream. So
Yeah.
all of this is jiggery pokery, and we're gonna have to figure it out from there. And we're also out on X as well, which surprisingly enough gets a couple of hundred views every week. So although that might be fake data, like I just literally have no clue whether people are just sticking numbers in. Anyway, okay, people seem to be able to hear me okay, which is fine. So let's roll forward. By the way, we're going to get a bunch of amazing guests on board, including one of our guests is coming from our sponsors today. Today's sponsor is Jovio, programmatic advertising product. And in fact, we're going to get Yasal to come back in a couple of weeks also to talk about what the heck programmatic advertising is, because we really do need to educate the market on this. It is one of those categories which I think that this kind of it's like a no-brainer, but for some reason adoption rate is super low. So we need to find out exactly why, and I think education is another thing we have to keep going on. So anyway, we're going to bring on Yasal in a minute. We're going to bring on Bill Fisher. We're going to bring on Alexander Chukovsky. I think Steve Rothberg's going to join us. Chris Russell's going to join us. Loads of people that know everything about job boards. It's going to be the thing. But we have Louis Trans here, who knows everything about everyone. So Louis, great to see you. For the people who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself? Like, who are you? What it is you do?
This topic is great for me because, as well as UK Recruiter, so I've been running UK Recruiter for 20 something years, which is for recruiters, agencies, in-house, all that space. But also I run a conference for job boards, so it's absolutely perfect. The Job Boards Connect for job boards. So I know all your guests. I'm very excited about the topic.
Did you hate any of our guests? Because
No,
what,
no, it's perfect. I mean, Stephen
good,
Rothberg and I are chatting all the time. Everyone knows Alex, Chris, absolutely brilliant, and of course Jovio, fabulous. So you've got a really great lineup. And
good stuff.
Bill Fisher. So no, it's going to be great.
Do you know what? I always worry about this because I don't really brief the guests in advance as to who's coming on.
No.
So one of these days, I want to actually get people on that really can't be on screen together, and it's going to be just fireworks.
Well, I'll tell you who they should be, and we'll plan it because I would love to see some of that.
Shall we actually set it up, folks? Shall we get like a nemesis on screen, unbeknownst to them, and suddenly they have to have dialogue on a topic and try and be professional? Okay, cool. Louise, let's go and review the newsletter real quick. Did you read it? And if so, what was interesting for you?
I did read it. I picked up two things to chat about, and one of them was actually your poll that you did, because you did a poll about for a leadership position, the contribution of personal appearance, how it affects decision making. And at first glance, I was like, "Oh, that's not too bad. It's very spread." And then when I looked at it like properly, I realised that less than 20% of people think that appearance has less than 10% impact on their decision to hire, if I read that right.
You did.
So 80% of people believe it has some 10% or more impact. I find that just, I get it. I totally get it. We have our biases and all the rest of it. But in a world where we're telling people to be who they are, be authentic, be yourself, all of this, and then also please dress like everyone else in the office and have a natural hair color and no tattoos on your neck. I just think that I kind of had hoped it was slightly higher percentage of people who don't believe it does have that impact.
You know what? I'm in line with you in this. I was disappointed at the results, but only because it confirmed what I thought was true anyway. Which was, by the way, the poll was, what degree of contribution do you think appearance has on a yes/no decision to hire a leader of a business? And the truth is that a lot of people said, look, it actually makes a difference. And irrationally so. I think everyone, there's loads of comments afterwards to say, look, it shouldn't be this way, but yes, we're not going to hire an ugly CEO, or if a person is tall, and we know this from measuring CEO height. The CEOs are above average height. Male CEOs are above male average height, for instance. So we like the height of a male CEO, and obviously that then applies to appearance. Do you see obese or people who are unusually shaped being in leadership positions? Generally, no. So I guess my sort of assessment of this is that obviously human beings are very visual creatures. We take those signals when we subconsciously will educate us as to what we do. We all know this anyway because we meet people in real life and we know we're immediately going to get that 1 second scan, boy or girl, and we're going to make assessments based on that. And yeah, obviously applies in recruiting. Like, what do you do about it? Do we do blind interviews? That's been sort of an answer. Do we lean more on different types of assessment before we get to that face to face? And of course, on the Zoom side, you're doing like video interviewing. It can actually hide a bit. I mean, I'm not a tall guy. I'm a 5'7". It's a classic, East Asian micro. But 5'7", you can't see that on screen. And there probably wasn't. Yeah, there's probably an equalizer by Zoom on the height thing. So maybe remote working, the problem goes away a little bit more. But in person, it's actually more significant. So difficult to handle, but that's the reality we have. Yeah, important that we actually know this. Yeah,
It is
that's
the
the reality.
reality. And I think that when we think about the biases that we try to remove in the recruitment process, the one we don't talk about is not hiring people who are not attractive to us or not attractive to our organization.
Yep. And you know what? I'm going to say something hyper controversial here. So yeah, actually just come at me. I'm not going to try and caveat a defense. Is it actually rational to be biased in that way? Because if you're thinking, you know what, this person is good looking or attractive, I like this person 1% more because they are good looking. Therefore, likelihood my clients will like this
Yeah.
person more. Therefore, they're legitimately more effective as a result. So
Absolutely.
it's the world is deeply unfair. But yeah, I mean, it may not be that irrational to have that assessment. And of course, we're now down rabbit holes, some really deeply difficult sort of thought processes. But by the way, 20 years or so ago, there were companies that were more or less explicitly hiring on looks. Do you remember, was it Abercrombie and Fitch, the US retailer? They
Oh
pretty much
yeah,
had a policy.
yeah,
Everyone needed to fit into their clothing,
yeah.
and everyone needed to be younger. They're a lot younger than who they're selling to. Look at airlines and air hostesses back in the day. Those were explicitly you needed to look like this. So
And I think
yeah,
that's for the airlines, it was to fit in with their brand and to make the customers think they had, they were an attractive brand with attractive people. But I used to hire for Pepsi and they wanted people who were Pepsi pretty. That's the words they used.
wow.
Because they were salespeople. They were going out with a boot full of crisps to flog
Mm,
them to
mm,
retailers, and
mm.
they had to look great. And they would not have overweight people selling their crisps because that was not the messaging they wanted.
That's right. That is right. It's awful.
Yeah.
No one's saying this is good, guys, so don't come at us on screen. But it is like, okay, this factors in either explicitly or implicitly, and I don't think you're morally better or worse for it being implicit or explicit. It's just simply, do you recognize the truth of it? Oh, by the way, Gavin, I did play rugby, and in fact, I abandoned the game of rugby as everyone else got bigger because I was actually a 5'3" when I was like 10. So I grew got most of my height when I was younger, and I was decent at the game. And then everyone just shot up above me, and then it became like dangerous. So I was like, okay, not doing that. All right, interesting one. Let's go for one more, and then we'll get our guest on, Louise.
Okay, and this is a sort of similar one. I'm afraid I've slightly cheated and gone for the one about submitting ridiculous CVs and how people don't read them properly. So there's two parts to this. One is that people not looking at people's names and just looking at the content in the CV. And then, of course, the other side of that, which I don't think the article mentioned, was people who just look at someone's name and because they have a name like theirs, Hugo double-barreled whatnot, they're like, oh, he's going to fit in perfectly.
Yeah.
So it made me think of the two sides of the appallingness of reviewing CVs.
Yeah, so if anybody doesn't know about this, this was an experiment launched by this job search consultant, I think he was, and it was a classic experiment. We've seen it before. You basically create a nonsense CV with certain buzzwords and the right companies, the high brand name companies in the experience, and send it off and see what happened. Apparently, he converted like a bunch of interviews with these highly credible businesses. But if you read the content of the CV, it becomes ridiculous. Like, for instance, like one of the bullet points of experience was to say, yeah, he organized like, sex scenes on Pornhub or something like this, which, maybe that's a job, but probably that's something to have a look at as whether that's relevant to what it is. But it gave an example, I think, of how human beings, or at least even AI assisted human beings, either way, we're looking at pattern matching as the first thing. So you do a 3-second scan on a CV. I think that's broadly the case. And you might read it later, but it's a yes no decision on that 3-second scan. And you're just looking at, okay, job title, a couple of companies you might be familiar with. Okay, yes, I'll look at that a little bit more depth. You don't see that, just move on and just flick it through. And your tolerance for reading on that the first second scan is really dependent on how many candidates you have. So if you have a deluge, you're going to have less time per candidate. So anyway, good experiment, and I think that ultimately it's one of those where we recognize that applications are generally not read in the way we assume or pretend that they are. And yeah, maybe we can do something about that. Who knows? Yes, there we go. All right, listen, let's get on with the show. Louise, you actually know more about job boards than most people. So feel free to commentate and contribute your own thoughts, even though you are in your role as a co-host. I'd be very interested to know what you've got to say on this as well. So okay, let's bring on our guests. We've actually got a load of guests, so we might have to do a roll on, roll off. I'm going to see. Actually, I've got you here. So what is the maximum number of people who can get on screen these days, Lou?
You'll be
Yeah.
fine. You can have 11 on screen in Crowdcast.
Is that because I've accidentally overpaid?
No, 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 no. See that all plans can have 11, and if you've accidentally overpaid, we'll have a little look at that later. But no, invite
I
them all
have.
on. I have you.
Yeah. You know what? I typically do that because it's like, oh, yeah, I can't tolerate a situation where there's a friction point. You know what I'm saying? So, okay, we have Yazal on screen. It's great to see you. Yazal, why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Sure, thanks, Hung. Well, I'm Yazad Dalal, or you can call me Yaz,
Yes.
and I work at Jovio. So thank you for having us on today and letting us be a part of this. And we're super excited to talk about programmatic advertising and the very interesting topic that you have named for us.
No worries. Great to see you, Yaz. I think RecTech Media is Chris, isn't he? So Chris, make it easy for me, man. I mean, don't put your brand on as a sign up. But I think that's him. Okay, we also have Alexander Tchaikovsky as well. Alex, good to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Good to see you all. Thank you for the invite. Hi there, Alex from Munich, advisor to the job board industry, helping with SEO, AI, job scraping, and operating a few niche job boards.
Fantastic stuff. Great to see you, Alex. And we also have Bill Fisher here with us as well. Bill, can you quickly intro yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're here. You good?
Excellent. So I'm Bill Fisher, as just been stated 3 times. So I'm CTO at Vonk. So I've been in HR tech for about 15 years, and happy
Yeah.
to be here.
Fantastic. Great to see you there, Bill. And we've also got Chris as well. Chris, wonderful to see you, sir. I think your debut on Brain Food Live, so awesome to have
Yeah.
you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Chris Russell, RegTech Media. I cover the space, podcaster. I'm also a job board consultant. Started my first job board back in 1999. So I'm an OG in the job board world.
Indeed. So I think the only person we have Steve Rothberg as well. So Steve, wonderful to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Founder of College Recruiter job search site and the co-host of the Inside Job Boards and Recruitment Marketplaces podcast.
Amazing. Great to see you. And by the way, credit to Chris and Stephen in particular for doing podcasting that is job board, job advertising related. I think we need that type of narrow focus. It's wonderful to have those. By the way, just drop a link to your podcast in the chat. The chat stream there. Make sure people know all about that. Okay, cool. Let's talk about the topic in question. Lots of ways in which AI, I put generative AI, but let's call it AI and take the generative out. Lots of ways in which artificial intelligence will be impacting the future of job board advertising. Can we kind of just list the ways in which you think it will affect things? Because we've seen, okay, are there going to be more AI type tooling that candidates can use? Do employers get more of this? Are we doing different things in terms of job ad discovery? What are you seeing out there? So yeah, why don't we start with you on that? I mean, what do you anticipate happening, or can you confidently predict will be the case when you think about AI and how it interfaces with the job board technology?
Sure. I think maybe to give you a benchmark, I'll tell you where we are today and then where I think we're going 3 to 5 years out. Today, the way we're using it for our clients, whether you think about an Uber or a Wells Fargo, is basically doing things at massive scale and massive speed, basically what humans can't do. I was in programmatic advertising 10 years ago. I had a fleet of people working for the Verizon account in New York, and we were doing, I think, 25 people, 10 hours a day, just to make sure that we had the right job titles for job postings or that we picked the right zip codes, and it was all manual. Today, we do what we call title expansion or location expansion in a completely automated machine-led way. There's no human involved. The machine knows that if you live in Jersey City, you're looking for jobs in New York City, not Jersey City. But it knows that if you're living in Brooklyn, you're not looking for jobs in Jersey City, even though you would imagine the converse is true. It's a really obvious one, but now imagine doing that at scale. Imagine doing that for thousands of jobs in 1,000 geographies. So I think this is an area where we do it today. Another area that, again, even 7 or 8 years ago was human-led in programmatic advertising was which publisher, which job board do I need to publish to? Which one's going to have the most impact? Craigslist is a great example of that. It's not cheap to post on Craigslist. It has great quality, which may surprise some people. But if you have to wait 5-10 days to see whether it's effective, you're going to lose time. We are using the machines to basically make that judgment in the first 4 hours of a posting, and then decide whether we pull it down and repost so that it goes back to the top of the list. So again, it sounds very simple, but at scale, no human can do that. In the future, though, which I'm super excited about, I love this idea of, imagine if X disappeared. Imagine if the CV disappeared. Imagine that instead you've got an electronic profile that, instead of showing the employers you have, it shows the roles you had only and the skills that you had to deploy in order to execute those roles successfully. And imagine if your name wasn't on there. I've got a funny name. What does it mean? Am I Jewish? Am I Muslim? Am I Greek? Am I Lebanese? Am I an American citizen or not? You don't know till I open my mouth whether I'm from this country or not. If we can get rid of all those biases that are associated with name or height, like you were talking about, I'm also 5'7", and Zoom makes me look like I'm 7 feet tall. Short kings stay together, hung. But if we could get rid of all of that, and then now imagine automating that, I think there's some really exciting things. The other one that I love the concept of, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, my belief in technology is my mother's belief. Okay, she's in her 70s. She never used a computer till she got a phone. Whatever she thinks it should be able to do, it should just do it. Why can't it do it? It has a camera. Why can't it do it? I think that's where we're headed. So imagine the next time that you look at a job posting, that the job posting, because you're logged in, knows who you are, and it re-edits itself, just like ChatGPT can re-edit what it's just written to tailor it to me in language that resonates with me. Imagine even more sophisticated if I've got my Fitbit on or my Apple Watch and I'm reading the job posting and it sees my heart rate go up because emotionally that's just, it seems like an aggressively written copy. Imagine if it softens it just to get me to apply. Apply conversions are the currency of programmatic advertising. So I mentioned that one. So just a couple of thoughts there around how do we bring together all the technology that we have, our willingness to have mild intrusions of privacy in order to have a positive benefit for us as a job seeker and a positive benefit as an employer. These are the things that I'm excited about.
No, that's amazing. Already I can see sort of that future laid out. Yeah. So thank you so much for painting that picture. And it already touches on some of the things that we need to kind of wrestle with. Like, do we want to have dynamic jobs, for instance, that adapt to the candidate, which I think most of us intuitively would say yes, but I suppose a critic might say is the job ad itself maybe changing, but does the job change? So you've got to kind of make sure the employer at the end of it is also kind of has consent for the change. What you don't want to do is adapt the job ad to the person, get a conversion, and actually it's the end employer thinks this is not what I designed. So maybe we've probably got to make sure that pipe is absolutely clear so that there's a consent that way. But I can imagine companies certainly being very interested in having jobs that would kind of be a little bit more fluid. Because you look at a fixed job today, how many jobs stay fixed over time? I mean, it needs to be fluid anyway. Everyone's job description today is going to be different in 6 months' time if we have to rewrite the job description.
You know, it's a really good example of that. We constantly advocate when we're doing career coaching, and I think probably many of us on this call are often solicited by our network to help with their CV. And we always say the same thing. Oh, you got to have a different version of your CV for every kind of job. You know, that spend time customizing it, or you need to have a different version of your CV depending on the industry or the geography. Why don't we do the same thing for job postings? Why don't we have a version that's looking for more strategic thinkers and one that's for more tactical people? Why don't we have AB or ABCD testing for job postings? That's what we're doing.
Because employers don't have the time for that. Yeah.
Sorry?
Employers don't have the time for that.
But that's where I think technology has a huge role to play, and where GPT has a huge role to play. Soften this job posting, make this more amenable to someone for Seattle than for someone from Boston.
Yeah, very interesting. Chris, you want to say something? Go ahead.
I was going to say too, what we're seeing AI in the job search process today is like on the basic level stuff, but the AI resume creation tools. There's a whole bunch of standalone tools like Resi, Kick Resume, Teal, resume.ai. And I think that the big job boards are eventually going to buy these products, put them into their feature sets like Indeed, ZipRecruiter. They're all going to have resume-based AI tools for their seekers, I believe, in the coming, next 2-3 years. So look out for that in terms of what's coming next.
Is that a good thing, by the way, folks? So you've got companies, so you can imagine a future of job boards where I am a person without a CV. So I arrive here without CV or an old CV that I haven't changed at all, but I'm confident a job board's going to help refresh this for me. And okay, I go on there, I type in a few things that I'm looking for, it generates a CV, and then, all right, that's perfectly matched to the various jobs out there. Is that actually a good thing, though? Because a critic on the outside might say, well, is it really what you want? Or have you just been lazy, clicked a few buttons and just generated something that helps you convert various things? And aren't you then putting in, bad data, so to say, into the process? I might optimize my ability to match to a bunch of jobs, but if it isn't actually what I want, then what's the point? So is there a risk, I guess, in making things too convenient for the job seeker? Thoughts on this? Steve, you want to have a thought on this?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that what Yaz's vision of like sort of where we are today, I would totally agree. It'll be really interesting to see whether we go in the direction he's talking about or not. It's like anybody's guess. I think it's one of the things that I hope we don't get into, and this also touches on the job seeker having their CV or resume rewritten, is I think it really matters who is actually directing that. If it's the employer directing the rewriting of their job posting ad so that it appeals to different people, great. If it's the job board doing it without the really explicit buy-in from the employer, forget about like a checkbox buried in the terms of service, but the employer actively wants that, great. But can you imagine as a job seeker going to LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, whatever, posting your resume, and then without your active involvement, having it rewrite your job, your resume, and then applying to jobs for you, and you're like, I was looking for a bartender job, not a server job. And it's the same thing on the employer side. Employers don't want their job postings rewritten without their active involvement. You can very easily get bias language in there that can be legally harmful to them, lead to them getting more applications, but the quality of those applicants really declines. I mean, I think we really need to think about who's in control of that document. And right now, Yas is absolutely correct that the currency in the job board world is the effective cost per application. And with AI, you can really drive that down, but that doesn't mean it's a good thing. It can really be to the detriment of the job seeker and the employer if it leads to bad matches. I think that when it comes to AI helping us, I think we really need to remember who us is. Is it the job board? Or is it our customer groups? Is it the employer? And is it the job seeker? And as long as we keep our mind on who we serve, not our accountants, but the job seekers and employers, then I think we're going to head in the right direction.
Yeah, really interesting observations. I'm tempted to say we are kind of responsible for ourselves. So, maybe the job seeker has to take some responsibility in terms of, do they enter into a job board process that might have this degree of dynamism? Maybe that's something they need to be aware of, and same with employers. But I totally get what you're saying. One angle where I think employers would be happy to kind of authorize a job board to create dynamic jobs is trying to sort of expand the diversity angle and create different language types or different type of ways to communicate to different communities. So oftentimes you need to have variable ways to do that, and it's recommended practice to do it manually sometimes, to have multiple versions of the same advert talking to slightly different audiences, because it's going to switch people on. But yeah, I think legitimate questions to raise. Alex, you haven't said anything yet. Let's bring you in to this conversation. What are your thoughts on what we've talked about so far? Do you have any additional thoughts on the future of job board advertising in this AI dominated world?
Well, I do think that AI enabled applications are going to be a problem. There is no way around it. I track these tools. I really love them. I play with them every day. And I have a list of 80 now, and some of them do really, really good stuff, like filling out apply forms on ATSs, which are not so simple to fill out, and it works really good. You can still validate the output. They create really customized CVs. So the trust factor is kind of going away. Now, what I'm about to say, you have to discount the fact that I'm an advisor at CV Wallet, right? But I do think that the huge opportunity for job boards is in this validation kind of verification direction, right? So I expect that a lot of job boards are going to start building up databases, profile databases, and build their own validation cycles that are specific for niches and the industries that they work at. And this is going to be a new revenue model, because if you build an an API on top of this, right? Let's just imagine the next 2-3 years, people will have some kind of agents or automation tools that score the jobs that match their criteria. If you have the API that feeds the data on the job board site, right, which is the jobs, to these agents, great for candidates. And if you have profiles to feed to the other side of the market, right, so the recruiters, and we all know that we have tens of companies trying to do the automation of the recruiter. If you are able to push them the profiles in a verified, structured way, and they can do the hiring from there, that's a huge opportunity. And we know that profiles are getting closed, right? X-ray on LinkedIn is gone. You've talked a lot about this topic. Twitter is closing profiles. It's getting hard to get this data out. So building the automated sourcing is not going to be the hard part, but getting the profiles is going to be really hard. And this is where the edge and where the value is going to be in the future. That's what I see right now.
What do you think about when you said this is a future revenue model for the job boards doing ID verification? What do you mean by that, Alex?
I'll give you an example. So in Germany, we have a big issue with people from applying from countries where they don't speak German language, right? So if you find ways to verify that someone knows the language, let's say upload a diploma from a local school, right? Then you should know the language because you finished high school in Germany, right? That's one easy, quick way to verify it. And if you go and talk to job board owners who actually talks to their customers, you will find out that every country has these kind of issues popping up, right? It could be work permits, it could be language knowledge, it could be pretty much anything. You have to dig into your niche and find what the value is going to be for your customers, where the pain is right now.
That's a really interesting thought process. Like, does the job board own the verification of the candidate? And if so, can you then, I guess, charge more, or is it something where you can say, look, do you want a guaranteed verified apply? If so, your job ad now costs $2,000 more, whatever it is. Because I think companies would probably pay. Lazy apply, I think, Chris, you mentioned this on chat. Absolutely. We're in a situation where AI-enabled candidates are obviously going to increase the apply rate, and that will drop the quality per application, right? Because suddenly
the quality is already bad now. So it's like, I talked to a tech recruiter. I was in Austin. I saw Yaz out there, and she said, I go, how many of your applies are unqualified today? She said 80%. I think it's pretty standard across the board for a lot of big companies like that.
That's crazy. Bill, let's bring you on. Go ahead. Who was saying?
Sorry, I was just going to make one quick point on what Chris said. The volume of applications means nothing if the quality is poor, and I totally empathize with whoever you met that said that. What we're seeing a lot of our clients demanding is that we track to shortlist or even to hire. And we have one client who says, well, you'll figure out who it is when I tell you, track to the driver's first fare. We want to know that they actually started driving, because then that tells us it was a quality hire. You actually found a driver who wants to drive and is already driving for us. So I think making that connection across multiple tech platforms for the employer so that they can prove out that quality is the measure.
But the employer too has some responsibility here. They have to do a better job at their job ads in terms of screening out the applicants they don't want, right? They still do a poor job at talking about who they want to apply for this job. And to me, that's also on their end, you know?
That's true and not true, I would say, Chris, because yes, job ad writing generally is bad.
But once the job board sends that clicks over to the employer site, it's up to the employer now to convert them into an applicant, right? So a lot of times they don't do a good job of that. It could be a poor ATS experience, or it could be a poorly written job ad that doesn't really help them screen out applicants that hit that page.
I think that is true if we understand as discerning applicants. But if we're at the stage where we've got lazy apply happening, mass apply happening, and more like obviously the market conditions kind of motivate candidates to apply to more jobs. We've seen sort of how difficult it is on the market. So people's they're not as discerning. I suspect a lot of people are applying to jobs they never have read in the same way recruiters are looking at applicants they don't read, because it's like the more the better. And as we lower the friction rate for the volume per person that they can apply to, this I think is something we've got to have an automated solution there. Bill, you're nodding your head on that. Bring you in on this. How do we deal with this AI-enabled candidate? Is there something that is this a problem that is handled by the job board? Is it a problem that's handled by the end employer? Is it a problem? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Cool. So the friction is important. So a good system requires friction. I think the frustration people have is that the way friction is introduced into the process is often through a bad candidate journey, through an ATS and through an application process. And I don't know that that serves anyone well. So I think, I think understanding where in the process we need to introduce friction, to try to find a way to make it value added, is super important. I do think AI can solve many of the problems that are being addressed, but there does need to be some process. There needs to be a step in the process or a validation, as Alex talked about, just to kind of have some vetting and some sort of prequal introduced in the system.
Do you know what? A friend of mine, Josh Willows, you might know him. Sort of, he works in our space. He probably would be a good guest here as well. He mentioned what is the optimal level of friction for apply, because we've always gone through the route of to make it easier. But we're probably getting close to the point where it's too easy, and hence we're getting this huge volume, and it doesn't serve anybody. So, and obviously, someone's gonna drop the Workday example any moment now. So obviously, we know you can have too high a friction. So what do we want from the what do we want from the candidate? What's the commitment?
I don't know how much commitment we need. If it's the right candidate, I don't know that we need them to demonstrate that much commitment. But on the friction, it really just needs to be the right friction to assess whether or not it's the right candidate for the right role. So the right level of friction is there. I do think AIs can take a lot of the pain out of unqualified applications. So I think AIs can do a really good job of narrowing, getting to a short list faster. So that removes a lot of the problem of having it be too easy for people to apply. So I think AIs will take a lot of that, will bear the brunt of a lot of that pain and do that processing. But I think you probably want a little friction. But there's a lot of friction in the hiring process. So the interviews, the follow-ups, there's already quite a bit of friction. There's an ample opportunity for the candidates to demonstrate interest in the role. But it would just be nicer to have it limited to a short list and not have 99% of the applicants have to suffer that pain when you only really need the 1% to demonstrate that commitment to that role.
Yeah. Yaz, you're definitely going to say something, but Louise, you've got your hand up, so let's go with you first, Louise.
Just briefly, I've always thought that there's a stronger role for matching for job boards, and some of them do it great, and lots of them, in my opinion, don't even think it's part of what their role really is. They are sharing vacancies, and they are allowing people to apply. And I think a lot of what we're talking about is about just matching right. And there's other parts of this, the AI thing we haven't even touched on yet. But if you can correctly match two people right now, I think it still takes a human. And I saw Angela say it's the human touch. But I think there's a bigger role, and we are talking about it, that the job boards can play in that. And what Yaz said about, you don't have all these skills. Do you want to update your CV or profile, or do you want to actually look for jobs where you do have those skills? Why aren't all job boards already doing this?
Indeed just launched their smart sourcing, which is kind of what you're going for there, Louise. So I see that as a good new matching tool. And ZipRecruiters, I think, have always been pretty good at that as well.
I have a couple concerns about the role of the job board in matching candidates. One is just sort of inherently, can it work for most jobs, let alone all jobs, most employers, let alone all employers, most candidates? One of the fundamental problems that we have in this industry is that job postings are forward-looking documents. This is what I want you to do. And resumes and CVs are backward-looking documents. This is what I've done. And so, especially when you're talking about candidates who are early in their careers, or I saw in the chat somebody posted about career changers, you are not going to be able to get matched up well with a job. If you've been in sales for 20 years, you've been in accounting for 30 years, and you're looking for your next role in a similar kind of capacity, the matching software works quite well. And the matching software works quite well when the skills are largely hard, like software developers. Doesn't work as well when the skills are largely soft, where it's more about your personality and your approach to interacting with other people. Another concern that I have is that the more that job boards get into matching, the more that they're actually not job boards, that they become staffing agencies. There's nothing wrong with that, but I do think that business-wise, legal-wise, whole host of issues that come up with that. In the US here, the U.S. Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, the EEOC, is very clearly going after job boards and other HR tech vendors that are getting involved in matching technology, where they know that the employer is relying on that matching technology as part of their screening process. And as soon as you cross that line, where you know that that employer got 100 applications, but they're only going to look at the top 20, and the top 20 that your tool has presented to them, now you're involved in their screening process. Now you're an agent of them. Now you're liable for their discriminatory hiring processes. So it's something that I don't think a lot of job boards have really wrapped their minds around. Are we actually in the job board business, or are we actually getting into the staffing agency business?
Yeah, so my hunch is that the matching is going to move to the large language models. So when I get to take a step back, and I think the original discussion on job boards is the value in data or advertising. I think it's data. And kind of bigger picture, in the recruitment world we're in, it's about a $300 billion opportunity. About 30 billion of that is on advertising. About 15 billion of that is job boards. So that's about 5% of the money in recruitment world is on is in advertising. And when you look at the $1 trillion invested in large language models, they're going to look at this opportunity, and I think they're going to focus on the 90%, and not that 5% or 10%. But what they need, though, is they need the data to be able to enter the sourcing, the temporary staffing, the matching, all the other parts of the value chain kind of in recruitment world, and they need that data. And so my hunch is that the large language models will try to get lock-in on that data, and then they will take over much of the rest of the function. An example would be, if you think about the generative capabilities of large language models. So a candidate opens up a Word document, they center their name on a page. The large language model will then say, looks like you're trying to write a CV. Do you want help with that? You say yes, it writes a CV. It'll then say, to create more value for the large language model, it'll then say, do you want help finding a job? And at the same time that's happening, you're going to have a hiring manager They're going to type the word position into a document. It's going to say, it looks like you're trying to write a job description. It'll then help you write the job description. After the job description has been drafted, it'll then say, do you want help finding a candidate? The large language model will then have the supply and the demand. Will have all that data. They have the best through embedding models and semantic search and other technology. They'll have a much better ability to kind of match those two together. And I think that's where they're going to create the most value. So I think when they're looking at the 300 billion in recruitment, it's in that matching function. And I think that's where they're going to focus.
Bill, I'm smiling because if I keep thinking about the word they that you're using, there is a they that owns a huge stake in ChatGPT, owns the world's largest word processing application, and the world's largest profile company, LinkedIn. So maybe that's the future of Microsoft, is a $3 trillion job board.
I think they're going to be a big player, but I also look at what Google's doing. You look at the HubSpot acquisition, where HubSpot is the system of record for the customers that companies have. And ATS is that system of record for hiring companies with candidates and job information. And so I think we're going to see similar moves to the Google HubSpot move with the ATS. So at some point, though, I think the large language models are going to want to get access to the data. One, the data is useful for a lot of downstream products that they can build. So there's a lot of value they can create from that data. But I do think having access to primary source of data on both sides of the market is where they're, I think that's going to be their focus. And I think Microsoft today is best positioned in that world.
What an enthusiastic and frightening prospect that we have ahead of us, folks. Listen, we're going to charge into this because this was a really interesting debate as to whether we need to rethink entirely what the revenue models might be for all of these actors in this system. But before we get into that, we always do a mini break in the middle of every session. The reason why is because clearly this is one of the best conversations I've been part of all year. And if you've enjoyed this, you definitely are a person that is switched on with regards to really deep thinking about the future of job board advertising. Don't let Brain Food Live to be a conversation starting moment and a conversation stopping moment, because we do have to come off air in about 20 minutes or so. So the best thing everyone can do now is to grab your LinkedIn URL. I'm sorry to say, it is LinkedIn. Drop it into your chat stream here if you're watching on Crowdcast. If you're watching this on any of the LinkedIn Lives, you're watching on Yaz's LinkedIn Live or Steve's LinkedIn Live or my LinkedIn or whoever it is, drop your LinkedIn a URL into the comment thread there. Then make sure you connect with everyone who's done the same. Best thing that can happen is you walk away with 20, 30, 50 or so connections that know about this topic, and then feel free to go ahead and interact with those people and have this dialogue. Because I think the more we talk about it, the more we surface these ideas, hopefully the more innovation that we can help inject into this industry. Okay, great to see everyone do that. Let's dive into accelerating moment that Bill has mentioned. Future of job boards may well be forgetting about the ads. Like, okay, do I care about £300 coming in per ad? No. I want to do a licensing deal with Google or something, a la Reddit, I think, where they had a big repository of proprietary data. The way I see it is you either build your own LLM or you kind of license it to someone else. I mean, do you see that as a potential future? Steve, you had your hand up, so go ahead.
Yeah, I actually, I was very surprised by how Bill put it, and happy, because when we were coming into this session, I was thinking about it differently than how he's envisioning it. The way he put it, it seemed to me that the sort of backroom deals that, say, job boards would have with the LLM companies are designed for the benefit of the candidate and for the benefit of the employer. That data is being used to make it more likely that if you hand over data, that you're going to get hired. The fear that I would have would be more of the Reddit kind of a deal. And I think that's very different. If I go to Reddit and I post content there, and Reddit is behind the scenes selling that data to an LLM, there's no benefit to me as the user, as the customer. So to the extent that job boards take resumes, take data on which job ads people are viewing, which job ads people are clicking the apply on but not applying, all of that data. The extent that we start selling that to OpenAI or other companies, I don't see any benefit there to our customers. I see benefits to us revenue-wise and profitability-wise. But again, if we operate in a manner that is a benefit to one or both of our customer groups, then I think we're on the right path. Employers, candidates, not our accountants. And if it becomes a cash grab to the detriment of the candidates, handing over data where it doesn't benefit them or to the employers, then I think we're going down a really bad path. And I think that will come back to bite us. Reddit, for example, is experiencing a lot of pushback by its users who are really upset that content that they're posting to a platform that they feel passionate about, that they feel ownership over, that they're part of a community, and that they see themselves now as being a commodity. And I don't think any job board wants to, pardon my French, piss off its users by having them viewed as a commodity. I think it's kind of a sociopathic view where we as a job board can say, you posted your data to us, you should have known better, we're going to sell it regardless of whether it's in your best interest or not. At College Recruiter, we're not doing that, and we're not going to do that. And I do think that the vast majority of job boards out there would agree with that they're not going to start to act by selling data to the detriment of their customer groups. But I absolutely think that there will be some that will.
Yeah, I think go ahead, Bill.
Sorry, what kind of data do you want to sell to an LLM as job board? I mean, you're not going to sell your activity data. That's pretty much useless to OpenAI.
Oh, I disagree, Alex. Especially
Please.
when you're talking data at scale, to know that candidates with certain profiles are looking at certain jobs and applying to some and not to others, and what's in your resume or CV and where those people are located, their job history, that is very, very valuable data, especially when you're talking scale. If you're talking thousands or tens of thousands of users, it's not worth the effort of the LLM. But when you start to get into millions, tens of millions, billions of user data points, like Vonk has, that's currency. And I think you have to be careful with it.
What is OpenAI going to do with this data? Like really concretely, what are they going to build? What do you think they're going to do with it? I understand the data. It's valuable. Absolutely.
My belief is, so Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, was on Lex Fridman, and he was talking about how they're going to make money. And where he landed was, it's not advertising, it's services. And so I think this is where people will feel comfortable sharing data with the large language model because of the services they get. So quickly on the Steve Rothberg. So the revealed preference from a candidate is super important. The signal if somebody's actively looking is super important. That kind of data at scale is really valuable. But I also think about our company Vonk. We're spending a lot of money on large language models, and we're getting parsing. We're building taxonomies. We're doing skills ontologies. We're doing matching. We're doing all of these services that we spend a lot of money on large language models to help us provide. But to do all that, the large language model needs to have a data set of all the current jobs and know what skills are new, new skills, how those skills are paired with other skills, how those skills are paired with new job titles and hiring data. So labor insights, we now rely mainly on large language models for building that. It's because they have that data from job boards, and aggregators, and there's a huge amount of value there.
So Bill, what you're saying then is basically the value is not in selling the data, but that value is actually building your own sort of LLM on this. And I guess going back to Steve's point, the companies that might sell the data probably are just checking out, like literally the finish with their experience as a job board owner and thinks, I'm out, I'm selling the data, and I'm on a beach. So yeah, maybe go ahead, Yas.
There's one area where I think all job seekers and employers would be happy for the data to be shared or sold or whatever, which is around skills. The amount of data captured by performance management or learning systems about employee skills, frankly, eventually become the only way of validating an employee's skills. Everything else is just whatever exaggerations we put on our LinkedIn profiles or on our CVs. I bet that hundreds of millions of job seekers would be okay with their current or past employer selling part of their performance or learning and development certifications, or allowing it to be added to a CV in a fixed way, whether that's in the blockchain or some other non-manipulatable format. And I bet you employers would be willing to pay for that data as well as a validation. The amount of skills fraud, whether it's intentional or not, because we all do puff up our CVs, is universal. And the ability to get to the root of the matter. Do you really, when you say you know C++ or something as silly as I know PowerPoint, what does it actually mean? What does it mean that you've delivered 1,000 projects? Are you PM certified? To have that level of validation from the education standpoint, from the employer standpoint, I bet you all of us would welcome that intrusion of privacy.
We're talking about a certifications database essentially that we can all source from. And, that's kind of a holy grail there.
I think if that data is objective, did you go to high school in Germany, and therefore you can infer from that the person has German language skills. They might not be fluent, but they're at least bilingual. I think that's fair. But think right now about people that you work with, and if they were to leave tomorrow and apply to another job, and you were going to try to evaluate, are they a good? Do they have good skills in this or poor skills in that? If you wake up in the morning and your spouse was just really shitty to you, and you go into work in a bad mood, and you have to evaluate your coworkers' skills, it's really subjective. And that could really come back to hurt people.
Yeah, how do you validate?
I don't know if employees are going to universally embrace their previous employer, even current employer, providing a very subjective evaluation on their skill set. If it's objective, I think that there would be more buy-in for that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Alex,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, so, Alex brought up a CV wallet, and I think CV wallet, I don't know if they have the right solution, but I think they've identified, an important problem is kind of this, having sort of this layer of vetted skills attached to candidates. So when you talk about introducing a friction point, if there was an entity in the process that had that layer of the candidates attached to vetted skills, whether it's a credential, whether they've done some sort of skills assessment. I think somewhere in the process, having that layer exist could really benefit, because that goes above and beyond just the keyword matching. So that's an area, but it's it's tricky to get there. It's tricky to get there.
It's never going to happen, though, is it? I mean, again, we go back to the big beast. I mean, the only organization that can possibly do it, maybe Microsoft, LinkedIn, GitHub, that entire monstrous sort of chimeric sort of creature, because it's got access to performance data. It's got access to the Microsoft stack. It could understand who's performing through that flow, and it can connect it to how those skills are then represented on as job candidates via LinkedIn. As far as I know, they're not connecting too much. I mean, I don't know too much about how LinkedIn are doing it. It seems to me, the big integration talk that we've been hearing about hasn't really happened. So I don't know. They're the only ones I can see that has the potential to do it, unless, as you say, some other company comes out with some miracle solution that you can get validated data that ports across different platforms, which I'm struggling to see. That's just a big ask to get that to work, I think. I don't know.
It's a big ask, but like GitHub was a great source for hiring, and in part you could get some sort of vetting of skills by looking at by looking at what people were posting there, and in the the validation they were getting from the community, and then even looking at your code when shared. I do think there are some of these, again, using large language models. You could do some sort of credentialing based upon data that's shared in some of these other third-party platforms, and so that could be used to kind of seed this layer, and then you would just need additional ways of getting people to provide data sets for it. But you're
Bill,
right, it's not a small ask. It's a big ask.
I think what Bill is hitting on there, and I agree, is I think that validation actually is very feasible for much smaller job boards. When it's a niche community, I think that validation actually becomes simpler than when it's a big general community like LinkedIn serves. If you've got a job board like Alex has, like crypto careers, how hard would it be to have some kind of an assessment where Alex's job board can basically, as candidates register, as they use his site, he can assess their crypto skills, right? That's
It's
a
impossible.
fairly narrow focus. It's impossible.
You're just going to have, my assessment on the left side of the screen, ChatGPT running on the right side of the screen, and everyone is going to go through the validation with perfect marks. That's why I love how Han Lee has been writing about this whole skill-based hiring, which is, in my opinion, just total buzzword with very little foundation. And that's not the way to go. The way I mean validation is really about skills. Is about very objectable things that you have and cannot be faked with a GPT running on the side. So like language knowledge, right? And you have a hard validation for this. The other thing, in a world post-GPT, skill-based hiring, I don't think so. That's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, it kind of calls into question, how do you evaluate those skills? And with so much of this world being so subjective, that the hiring world is, do we even really know what skills are? How one hiring manager defines that skill versus another?
Yeah, validating skills is a very subjective problem there.
Do you know what? I don't think the words. I'm going to challenge the word subjective, because I think it's more like it's contextual rather than subjective. So in other words, where I think skills-based hiring ultimately goes, that it doesn't go universal. Here's how you do it. It's going to emerge really from how a particular organization is themselves understand the skills. So it will end up being a much more diverse way of applying the solution. I want to point everyone to what Yaz has just put in, by the way, onto the chat screen. I thought it was actually super interesting. So Yaz, do you want to talk us through what you've just done there?
Well, we were talking about GitHub a few minutes ago, and it came up a couple of times because obviously they're taking profiles, but then scanning the internet for other evidence of the candidate's skills. And so I asked ChatGPT, what would an exaggerated version of that look like if it were to do that for just all of us in the future? And what it was suggesting was, imagine having a life profile, a digital twin that takes into account not only your professional crafted CV, but then also data from all other platforms. I imagine this would be opt-in, but capturing data from your wearables, from your Strava, from the community center that you volunteer at, or your school or whatever, and bringing all of that in, all those puzzles. Are you great at Candy Crush? Real world example, I know an employer, I don't agree with this, but I know an employer that asks candidates to show them their Uber score, because it's a measure of how you treat other people. So imagine bringing all of that in, and then having an employer being able to evaluate you across your ability to handle stress, your ability to solve complex problems, etc.
Interesting.
I like that a lot. But I think it goes back to the friction question. And I think if there's friction around a candidate having a set of verified skills, or verified credentials. But the problem is now, if they have to do a in-depth skills assessment for 30 different jobs they're applying for, that's way too much friction. But if they could invest in some sort of skills assessment that they could do once, and then that skills assessment could be made available to other hiring companies, I think we can get people to make that investment in time, because I do think with all the tools for building, it's so easy to cheat all these things, and we're removing so much friction from the process. But I do think ultimately we're going to need we still need a governor on the process, and a single in-depth skills assessment that is performed with some periodicity could be part of the solution to it.
Bill, I totally agree with you, and it goes back also to two other topics, which is one, allowing job seekers to have a validated credential on their CV, and two, that they keep their own data. To give you an example, I don't know how many different assessments I've taken for jobs over my career. All the fancy ones, the Graftons, and in the old days MBTI, and probably a dozen. And some of them take an hour or two. No one's ever given me the right to, and I've recently been asking for them when I take them, and they give them to me. But shouldn't we be able to just take our Grafton score or our First Mind score or whatever and have it watermarked onto our profile on LinkedIn? LinkedIn could easily do that, and now it's portable.
I love that.
And then think about that from a skills assessment perspective. There's 1,000 providers. Let a LinkedIn or other job boards or CV databases have a relationship with them where there's a validation. You get a badge. Now that's portable. It saves so much time, and also we'll wear those badges as a source of pride. And you do it opt-in if you don't want.
No, I love that. So EY, EY is renting office space in London. They have people, tens of thousands of people, go into a nondescript building. They're at a cubicle. They have a number 2 pencil. They have paper, and they do the skills assessment because they want something that has an air gap, from the internet, so they can't use ChatGPT. And I think it's fine for people to do that once, but not if they're applying for 30 jobs. But if there was a way to then take that skills assessment from that one entity, then be able to again watermark that, attach it to your profile, have that be shared, I think that could create real value in the system.
Did you guys get verified on LinkedIn? Did you have like the blue mark? Because that's the first step, right? So if anyone can verify any skill, it's my past employer, like in reality. So that's just the first step. The blue tick, that's going to be the blue tick for my past job, and so on and so on.
Do you know how much money global employers in India spend every year on background check because of the education certification fraud that unfortunately goes on in certain markets? It would be so simple that if one background check company checks you out, that you get a little badge that's somehow not erasable. It would save those companies millions of dollars. And there's similar examples in countries all over the world. We have an allergy, I think, in Western democracies of having a serial number attached to our name. But how much of this would be solved? In India, everyone has a number, the Aadhaar card. It would be so easy if all you did was show your Aadhaar card, and now all of your information that's not erasable is on the barcode or on the magnetic strip. That's it. You want my CV? Scan.
You know what? I think that's a really interesting vision. And by the way, on the ID side, actually, even in Western democracies, so to say, most of those have some facsimile of verified ID. In the US, you have a social security number, or you have a FICO number. In Europe and EU, everyone's got an ID card. So, we're probably more conceptually objecting to the idea that there is a record in our mind, but there is. It exists. So maybe we need to just mature on that and figure out that's the way. The only sort of dystopic view I've got on this is, do we want a world where, genuinely speaking, we can objectively say some people are better than others, and that's a stamp? So in other words, there's going to be people that actually are very bad at these skills, and do you want them to walk around and say, "Oh my God"? In other words, we all kind of think we don't want people to BS their way into success. Of course we don't. But what does the world look like if it becomes overly meritocratic, so to say? And we can say, actually, we can 100% verify everyone's skills, and therefore, you know what, we're just going to hire the top 25%. Then you've got the bottom 75% that really have no stake and no hope. So anyway, we're now moving down to we're now moving into a part 2, which we have to do, because this has been one of the best conversations, I think, that I've had on Brain Food Live. I would not even say this year, I would say ever. So folks, if you think this is a good conversation to try and replicate. If you think there's more to go, let me know in the chat, in the crowdcast, or if you're watching this on any of the LinkedIns, do drop us a comment whether you want us to see our guests back again for a part 2, because I think this speculative, I don't want to call it it's speculative fiction, but I don't want to say that as a negative thing, because I think this is exactly the sort of imagination we want to have, because we want to try and solve some of these ethical problems, practical problems in debate before it starts being productized, and testing it in that way. So I just want to thank all of our guests for being such a wonderful, intelligent, and educational group. So thank you very much, all of our guests. Alexander Tchaikovsky, thank you, Bill Fisher, thank you, Chris, thank you, Stephen Rothberg, thank you, Yaz. Wonderful to have you on the show. I'll let you go because I know you're busy and it's coming into Friday afternoon, and no one works Friday afternoon, do they? So have a good weekend, all you guys.
Enjoy Canada, eh?
Have a nice weekend.
Thank you. This was fun.
Guys,
Thank you very much, Hung. Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Let's do part 2 soon.
So, Hung, I'm never a fan of shows with so many guests, but how cool was that? Everyone shared their thoughts. No one spoke over anybody else. Lovely. I mean, it wasn't, you curated it perfectly, and so much great stuff in the chat.
My mind is blown. I mean, that was just such a good conversation. And I'm very keen to just replicate that, because we had more to go. There's no doubt we had more to go there. And to be honest with you, that conversation should be, I think, replayed to tech entrepreneurs everywhere. And it should be replayed to anybody who's thinking along the lines of how do you design, how do you design and produce technology that actually is going to be net positive for everybody. So listen, everybody, thanks for watching. I hope you've really enjoyed it. We'll be back next week. We're going to be more practical next week, because we're going to be talking about, okay, LinkedIn X-ray is gone. What next? So this is like part 3 of our LinkedIn X-ray, catastrophe. What sourcing opportunities? How do sources behave? Identification candidates. If we can't really use LinkedIn X-ray, what other options do we have there? We've got wonderful guests. We've got Brian Fink. We've got Erin Matthew. We've got we've got Dean DaCosta is joining us. So loads of amazing people are going to be there. Sign up for that show. It's already on. Make sure you follow the channel. I will be getting the May schedule out later today. So you look out for that. It's going to be amazing. All right. I'll see you next week. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
By the way, Luke, before you go, I just want to say thank you. I know that sort of being a host is a bit weird, sort of when you've got sort of all these brain boxes there, but I hope you enjoyed it. I was like fascinated by it.
It's such a perfect topic. It totally held my interest. So thank you very much for having me. I'd like to come back for part 2.
You will be there, because I just wonder, because I'm interested in the Job Boards Connect conference, because where is that conversation going in that space? By the way, if you're not sort of aware of that conference, it is definitely one to turn up to, even if you are not particularly niched into job boards. And the reason why is because you get conversations of this type that isn't the standard recruiting stuff that you can get anywhere. It really is just more deep, more niche, and really interesting to see. When is Job Boards Connect, by the way, Luke?
It's in a month's time, 16th of May. I'm going to drop you a note after this about it. I made a ton of notes here because we've actually got a session on AI and the kind of future of the job board space as part of that. And I think we're going to maybe continue some of this conversation there, because Stephen will be there. Some of them will be there.
You know what? Do the conversation on live. That'll be an amazing part 2. So fantastic. All right, Lou, listen, I'll let you go. You have a good weekend, okay?
And you. Bye-bye.
I'll see you soon. Cheers. All right, that's it. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Thanks for watching.